Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Yeah? Good? I'm Josh. And before I get started, it's kind of hard to see. Can I just get a show of hands? How many of you out there would eat something that looks like these apples or a potato or something that sat in your fridge a little bit too long? All right, so like 25%. Okay. So the reason that I ask these questions is to get us to think for a moment about what it is that we're actually willing to eat. In light of the fact that in the US, we waste 141 trillion calories of food every year. So to put that into perspective, if you assume a 2,000 calorie diet, that's enough food to feed 193 million people, which is about 60% of our population. Which I find actually pretty crazy in light of the fact that about 78 million people last year were considered food insecure. So we have a lot of people who are struggling to put enough food on the table, and a lot of edible food that's getting wasted that should be getting eaten. And it's not just an issue of hunger, it's also an issue it's an economic issue. It's according to the USDA that food is worth about $161 billion. So it's also an issue of economics, and it's an environmental issue in that when food goes to the landfill, it decomposes and produces methane, which is a greenhouse gas that's 21 times more potent than CO2 when it comes to climate change. So there are tons of people who are working on this issue. Here in New York City, we see things like trying to convert that food waste to energy, like here in Newtown Creek. Or more prominently, we see people starting to focus on things like composting, which is kind of having a moment in New York right now. And I should admit, like, I'm a total geek for composting. Carl, who you'll see in a little bit, actually accused me of eating compost, which I don't do. But I can be found like hoarding apple cores and banana peels in my pockets to find composting for them. So it's something that I believe in. But the issue is that when we actually look at the hierarchy of how we should be managing food waste and how we should be dealing with that, composting and turning it into energy is actually pretty low. What we should be doing is figuring out ways to reduce less and feed people with the food that we're growing. And I sort of fell into a similar trap that we've seen here in New York, which is I was focusing on the waste a lot. I was trying to get people to care about composting, and I was taking these beautiful photos of my compost to try to start conversations with people. And what I realized through the research was that actually waste wasn't the thing that was going to be a hook for people. Because people find waste to be kind of icky. They think that managing their waste or dealing with waste is something that would be hard to do. And also that it's kind of something that makes you feel a little bit guilty. But food is something that all of us do. We all eat. A lot of people are foodies and sort of are highly engaged in the topic of food. So I started asking, what could I do that takes food and manages waste in some way instead of taking waste as the beginning? And that led me to this idea that I'm calling the spectrum of desirability, which is basically just saying that food exists on a spectrum. And right now, most of us eat a pretty narrow slice of that spectrum. You can see right here, for a number of reasons, whether that's because you think it's going to make you sick or you think that it's not going to taste good or what have you. But imagine what would actually happen, the collective impact, if all of us just started eating more of the food that's actually edible. And with that, I ask all of you in this room today to join me and eat everything. And so it's my goal to inspire and empower everyone who cooks and eats to make the most of the food in their lives. Because it's something small that actually all of us could do that if we did it would make a big difference. And so I started wondering, like, will people embrace, that's kind of a strange idea, will people embrace it? And I decided to host some supper clubs to test it. Partially because, as Sarah mentioned, sort of food is this social experience and it's sensorial, and those are the assets that food brings people together, and people already do it and care about and are excited about, and also because it's already part of the food lexicon. As you can see here, dining clubs are the new dinner parties. So people are already doing this. And so I decided to host, I've done 3 of them so far in about the last 6 weeks, but I'm going to just talk about the most recent one to give you guys a taste. Pun intended. So I called it the Salvage Supper Club. This one happened a couple of weekends ago in Gowanus, Brooklyn, on the Gowanus Canal, al fresco. We had 16 guests who came. Sadly, we had to turn away a waiting list of people because there wasn't enough space to accommodate them. And basically, it was just a beautiful 6-course tasting menu where every course featured at least one ingredient that would have otherwise been unused or thrown away that was turned into great food. And in most of the dinners that I did, there was either at somebody's apartment or at our studio. But for this one, I decided to do it inside of a demolition dumpster. And I'll tell you why. Part of it was just so that I could have a nice story and beautiful pictures to show to you guys. But the other part was that when you think about a lot of the food we throw away, the outside looks bad, but inside it's like totally edible. It's great food. And I think it's sort of similar to this. It's like the dumpster, well, it was a dumpster on the outside, and you can see it in the corner with its dumpster buddies. But inside, it was this warm and inviting place that people actually wanted to be, that they were enjoying themselves together in this social environment. And I thought that that was a really apt metaphor. It's like we can actually change people's attitudes and behaviors if we pull the right levers. And so here you see Celia Lamb. She's front and center here. She was the collaborating chef on this. She's a student from the Natural Gourmet Institute, and she was super excited about this and also like such an amazing treat to work with. She brought 3 of her classmates from their school, which is here in Chelsea, and they made this awesome menu. And so much so, actually, that the Natural Gourmet Institute, where they're from, now wants to collaborate on more dinners this summer. So it's like really exciting to see. And they're not the only partners. It took tons of people's excitement to really make this happen. So we had people from DSI donating food from their own homes where they weren't going to eat it. We had farmers from the farmers market at Union Square donating food that they weren't going to be able to sell. We had materials being donated. So it was a real team effort. And the food, so just to give you a taste, pun intended, of the food. So we took some of these aesthetically unsellable carrots, and Celia and her team turned it into this roasted carrot hummus, or some baba ganoush, which was from overripe eggplant. And they took those apples that you saw earlier, which were donated, and that crazy potato, and they turned it into this roasted parsnip potato soup that had this chive oil drizzle, which was just like so delicious. Or brown bananas, which I'm sure many people in this room have probably seen in their own homes, and they turned them into a banana custard with almond meal crust. And everybody ate every scrap on every plate in every course. It was just like unbelievable to see. And so to talk about impact, we had 3 dinners, 48 guests, and we salvaged 68 pounds, which in the grand scheme of things is not a ton. But I think that the impact actually comes when you start thinking about the changes in people's lives. So people started asking for the recipes. How can I make this own? How can I eat everything in my own home? So we started giving them recipe cards and emailing recipes to people. Or we started seeing people's attitudes change, like Callie, who came to the second dinner and said, now when I go to the grocery store, she's not quite as judgmental about the things that she buys. Or George, who was actually here, who came to the first dinner and said, I'm definitely not as worried about getting sick from these foods. I know that I can eat them. He actually changed behaviors. And so it was only 3 dinners, but I genuinely believe that there is a scalable and sustainable business model here. I have chefs who have already said that they want to collaborate on dinners this coming summer. I have a growing list of people who actually want to attend those dinners. People have been paying on the last dinner $25 to come eat them, and it's with food that's going to get thrown away, and the food is inexpensive or free. And it's not just here in New York City. It's like, imagine what it would be like, or bigger than that, if we had all of these grocery stores coming and we had all of these farmers at the farmers market selling stuff and selling produce that they wouldn't be able to sell, and we had chefs collaborating with us. Or if we moved it beyond New York and we could say we open sourced the tool for how to do this and gave people some of the ways of doing it so that it could go bigger than New York. Or we created a website like eateverything.org where we could provide recipes for people so that you could do it in your own home. Or we could say where the closest supper club is or how you could host your own. All of these things to enable people to actually start doing this in their own lives. So just to sort of wrap up, at that last dinner, we had 1.6 pounds of food per person. If we could just get 5% of New York, let's say, that's 400,000 people. That's 640,000 pounds of food that would get eaten that's currently being thrown away. And I know compared to 133 billion pounds, that's pretty small. But it's a small thing that we can actually all start doing now and doesn't require some big, crazy infrastructure to develop. So if you were one of the people in the audience who saw this potato and said, like, that's disgusting, I will never eat that, I hope that at least, like, over the last few minutes, you've started to rethink what it is that you actually can eat. And I hope that you'll eat everything. Thank you.